Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Deal, where we discuss business, entrepreneurship, and commercial real estate. My name is Lacey Labs, and I'm here with my co-host, Laura Martin. In today's episode, we interview Paget Rhee, owner of 2 B-Balance locations in Central PA, an Airbnb investor and world traveler. Paget has decades of experience in small business and organizational leadership, and has owned her own business for the past decade, helping women navigate hormone balance and holistic health. Paget is also an investor in Airbnbs and consults others in creating a great Airbnb experience. In her spare time, Paget is an avid traveler and has a passion for people. Tune into this episode to hear more about Paget's journey, the business experience that she shares, her travel experiences, and what advice she would give to younger entrepreneurs looking to get started in business and in life. Paget Rhee, welcome to Beyond the Deal. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. This is so much fun. Glad you're here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Well, let's get started. Go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, how you got started in life and business.
Life and business. So I did grow up in central Pennsylvania in the Ephrata area and left early. At 16, I went to college, and from there landed in D.C., in Washington, D.C., and I really loved it there. But my heart was always really to work with communities of need. And so I started a program with homeless teens, and I had worked in the city, which was amazing opportunity and challenge for a young woman from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, being one of the only whitish people there in D.C. and very young. So that was a real stretch for me personally. I founded a nonprofit a long time ago. I hate to say in 1994 because it feels like that was like so long ago, but founded a nonprofit to really help a community of kids down there. And then when we talk about business, had to really quickly learn that I couldn't fund the nonprofit, so I created a business to fund the nonprofit. So I think kind of that's maybe how my business element got started. It was very out of the box at that point in time to have a for-profit type of business that was to fund a nonprofit, but it was powerful, and it was something that I was really excited about.
So what was the for-profit business that you started?
It ended up being a ministry in and of itself, but I didn't see it that way at the beginning. I think what I learned about business is you always just take what's in your hands. What are the resources that you have available? Mm-hmm. So when I landed in D.C., I really just had a vision. And I ended up meeting a pastor of a very old church. He had about 100,000 square foot facility, but nothing going on. Back in the heyday in the 60s, it was a very popular church, but it was very decimated at that point in time, a very small congregation. And so he had the resource of this huge facility, but really nothing to do with it. So he said to me, I'll give you $5,000 seed money and you see what you can do. Well, ignorance is bliss, because I thought $5,000 I was good to go, having no idea how far that was going to go. So we ended up opening just opening up to kids. It was a very dangerous time in Washington, D.C. I don't know, if anybody knows about D.C. in the 90s was very dangerous. And a lot of the recreation programs had closed. And so therefore, these kids had nowhere to go. And that was my heart. So I started opening the doors to after school programs. And within a week and a half, I had 120 kids. And I thought, this is a problem because I'm the only one here. So I ended up getting volunteers from Georgetown Law, from Howard University, which were universities near me. And so we just started this after school program, but then I didn't have money to feed the kids. I would go every night to all the restaurants and they would throw all the leftover croissants and everything into bags that I would feed the kids. So from there, we really grew. And I realized that we had this huge third floor with nothing going on. And so I ended up building bunk beds and starting to host mission teams from all over the country. People wanted to come to D.C. and do mission work, but had nowhere to stay. So I created a program called Urban Hands, and Hands stood for helping another in need by demonstrating servanthood. So we charged, my parents always thought this is amusing, that I charged people to come and stay and work for me. So through Urban Hands, we would charge them $100 a day. We would feed them, give them opportunity to work. And I developed a poverty simulation, which was an experiential poverty simulation training that helped them really understand cycles of poverty, urban issues. So through that program, we were able to fund 10 sites across the city. So we grew from my one site to developing leadership throughout different communities, and then provided those leadership with hands for after school and summer programs. So it ended up that I was able to serve about 1,500 kids a year through this program. And the Urban Hands program that I thought was just a means to an end ended up being an amazing opportunity to give people the chance to have an experience in DC that was life-changing. But my words to them were always, the needs are where you come from as well. They might look different than they do in DC, but go back and find the needs and make changes. And so we always kept in touch with them to find out what were they doing in their community to meet needs of others. And from a Christian point of view, just really act as the hands of God was our goal. So both of the programs turned into really powerful experiences for the users, but it was an interesting idea for the church that I could make money over here and then use it over here. So it was a good thing for a young person. I was about 28 when all of that started. So anyway, that was fun.
You were casting a lot of vision in a lot of people's lives on multiple different levels.
I didn't see it at that time. I just saw it as this was something I was passionate about. And we grew, and the organization is still there today. And when I stepped down, because I knew that I would be guilty of neglecting my own children because the needs of everyone else's were so great, the pastor who gave me that opportunity actually stepped down from the pastorate and took over all the programs. So I continued to stay on as an executive consultant for many years and have a really good relationship with them. But yeah, I was blessed with that opportunity. But there were times where there would be gunshots right outside of my car door, and I had my 2-year-old in the back seat, and I just felt at that moment maybe this wasn't fair to put my kids into. So,
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So came back here to Central Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So you've always been entrepreneurial.
Entrepreneurial, yeah. But then there are times you do what you need to do to get by. And from there, I came to work in my family's business. And at that point in time, I saw it as just a means to be able to be home every day when my kids got home. But I didn't realize that there was going to be an element of that, that building experience. So we built log cabins all over the world for the U.S. military and for commercial projects. From there, I had to go from working in the inner city, how do I manage a food bank and all the homeless people, because I didn't even mention we had created a commercial kitchen with all the homeless guys that used to be outside. We trained them how to work in the kitchen, and we fed all 3 meals a day to all the kids and all of the mission teams. So, there was a lot of varied experiences that I had in growing that. Coming back now, and now I'm going to learn about snow loads and wind loads and building codes in California and all over the world, which was another challenge. And being the only female in my family's business at that time was a challenge, working with all these guys. But the building experience that I learned there, I didn't know it, but it would come in later in life. So it was a good transition.
So you worked for your family's business while your kids were young.
They were younger, yeah.
So, but at some point you made a transition to be balanced.
I
so
did.
How did that happen?
I know. It seems like I've jumped from all these different things. I was actually just meeting before this with a young lady that I've been mentoring. I mentor a peer group of young women and really talking about this transition from thinking that I need to stay with the same thing for 20 years to have it, be an expert or be valuable. Mm-hmm. And I've learned just more recently, like how all of my varied experiences have been beneficial in what I'm doing now. So coming to be balanced, when we moved back here to Central Pennsylvania, I knew that I wanted to have another child. We had 2 biological children, and so we adopted my 3rd from foster care. And I get emotional talking about it. It was a challenge. Mm-hmm. So how I got to be balanced was my daughter that I adopted had a lot of special needs. Mm-hmm. And I woke up at about 45 looking in the mirror saying, I don't recognize myself anymore. If anybody knows, this is in kind of a Be Balanced hormone assessment, but early menopause can come on because of undue stress. Your body's not able to manage, your adrenals aren't supported. So I went through all of that myself. Early, I gained a lot of weight. I wasn't sleeping. I was depressed, all the things. And I learned about Be Balanced at that time. It changed my life. I lost about 60 pounds in 3 months, but more than that, I felt more like me again. And I think that's how a lot of our clients would describe it. So Be Balanced was a baby who was founded in Lancaster, and I had the opportunity to start the first franchise of Be Balanced. Okay. And so I left that job. Actually, I worked that job with the building industry for about 1.5 years while I built Be Balanced. So anybody who thinks they're going to start a business and it's just going to be great, and I love that for them. But I don't know that it's always that way. So for 1.5 years, I did both. And I started the first Be Balanced. So that is a franchise. And I didn't necessarily want a franchise at that time, and I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that this was a great opportunity and that I wanted to make a difference in the other lives of other women, like Be Balanced had made a difference for me.
Yeah.
In the next 11 years, I really learned about being the first franchise and developing the structures and systems that are necessary for a franchise to be successful, and I was part of that growth and that development. I actually stepped into the home office for 2 years as a COO for Be Balanced. I ended up then taking over 3 units in Dallas, Texas, which is a whole nother learning experience. You know, when you're used to, you're used to being in central Pennsylvania, and I now had 3 centers in central Pennsylvania. And I was just loving building a team and transitioning from like direct client engagement to really now resourcing my team and giving other women the chance to live their best life by seeing a difference in the lives of other women. Then I had the opportunity to take over some challenging centers in Dallas, Texas. So going to Dallas for about 18 months every other week and proving to myself that I can now take what I know here and I can actually, replicate it there was empowering. It felt really good to be able to move in that way and take knowledge and just kind of translate it. So that was exciting as well. I've kind of let go of those centers at this point in time and just focusing on the ones here in central Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yeah. That's amazing. You've done so many things.
Yeah. Good or bad, it's all it's all good.
So you clearly have a passion for this Be Balanced.
I do.
Do you still work day to day in it?
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I do resource my team.
Yep.
I had a great team dinner with them last week. I do staff meetings, but now I'm really just a resource to them. And they celebrate what I'm doing, outside of Be Balanced, and I celebrate them and thank them. Yeah. For me, I looked at my team when I made some transitions and said, thank you for being that stronghold for me and allowing me to kind of spread my wings and do other things.
Yeah.
So that brings me to one of the things we didn't really talk about is I actually have a whole nother business as well where, again, necessity sometimes leads you to the best opportunity. So in 2020, my daughter graduated from college, and many people might have had this experience. What are you doing? You can't do anything, really. And we knew that student loans were coming within 6 months. So thinking about the rich dad, poor dad concept and going back to my building experience, we bought a house and we renovated it into an Airbnb to pay student loans. And from there, it evidently worked very well. So her and I created a separate company together. So my daughter and I also own 2 different companies, one that builds and renovates houses and manages Airbnbs. And then we've had the opportunity to be invited to now renovate and manage for other people. So we have 2 different companies that we're kind of doing that on the side. So.
I remember when Haley was graduating college and you were saying she's going to buy a place and do that, like New Holland or something?
It was in Ephrata. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I know. We invited Laura we were looking at a project at one point in time. We're thinking, maybe she could come in with us. But yeah, it's grown. So we opened our first one in January 21. And we currently have 9 properties that we manage, 6 that we own and 3 that we manage for other people. So, when I was talking about how all these varied experiences come back to you, I think that my building experience in the log cabin industry and having to learn all the things has lent itself well to managing contractors and knowing what we can do and thinking creatively. And we have an amazing team of guys that now work with us. And I know they find it humorous. They think they should videotape my daughter and I because I'm sure it is humorous. But and when we go to Home Depot, everyone knows us because there's not a lot of mothers and daughters working together. So I was like, good morning, Haley. Good morning, Haley. So we have a good time with it. But I didn't know that the log cabin experience would come in so valuable. Yeah. And it's been fun. Like, that's not something I planned. I never went out and said, I think I'll buy real estate. And we didn't really even have any money to do it. I think that's another thing that if I would tell people, I think I would have never thought I could do some of the things that I've done because I would have thought I needed more money. But you use what you have in front of you, and you start small, and you build on that. And I think maybe that's some of the mistakes some business owners make is trying to go too big too fast. And so we really started all of these houses with literally like $20,000, and just kind of grew
hard
from there.
work.
Yeah, which is still a lot of money. I'm not negating that that's not a lot of money, but
To do what you did, though, that's incredibly reasonable.
yeah, it wasn't as much as you would think, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, don't negate an idea, or you might know someone, and once you start the first one and the ball is rolling, you can pay back that investor and move on with what you've built. So
I got to tour two of them in downtown Lancaster a couple weeks ago, and that was really cool to see.
yeah.
So Lancaster City, I know, changed some of their code around Airbnbs. Did that affect you guys?
So we were very fortunate. Again, we never planned on actually having them in Lancaster. We had an opportunity to buy a house in Lancaster, which was our biggest, most expensive house, and we finished it right at the time when all the interest rates changed, and ended up having to hold it. When I'm in this peer mentor group, sometimes women, will ask me, what do you think is your greatest asset? I think one of my greatest assets right now is being fearless, because if you've been, around you're a little younger maybe than Laura and I, but, if you've gone through challenges, you figure, what's the worst case scenario? If I can live with that worst case scenario, then I'm okay to attack any challenge. And so this house we took on, we thought we were just going to be in and out, 2-month flip. And the 2-month flip has now been almost 3 years. And so we flipped that house in Lancaster, and then we turned it into an Airbnb. And so thank goodness that it is in the central business district. So yes, about 2.5 years ago, the Lancaster City went from having about 240 Airbnbs to only having less than 50.
Right.
And we were in that range that we were allowed to act as an Airbnb. Wow. So that worked out really well for us. We were very fortunate. Yeah. And so that house is still renting, and it's been, some decisions are right and some you make right. And I think that one we made right, and it's good. Since then, we've been invited to help another commercial project renovate houses into an Airbnb. And so that's been fun. That was a really challenging project. I think in old houses, you have to get used to not having anything easy or square or straight, and you figure it out, and everything is figure-outable. So,
do you guys do all the renovation yourselves? Like, you and Haley do it?
We're in the game every day. I'm not doing. We don't paint anymore. We don't do some of those things we used to do. We have an amazing team of guys, but we're in there problem solving and creating, and sometimes pushing them a little bit,
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. Like, we'll be like, no, you can do that. And from my experience, I do know a little bit, which is kind of cool. And sometimes when I push them and they say, oh, yeah, it did work, it's like, yeah, sometimes the girls do know what they're doing. So it's been fun. The group of guys that we have to work with, it's cool, to see them trust us. We trust them. We push each other. And I think we have a really good time together. So it makes it a great work environment. But I do know that guys have a very different experience working as girls as their boss, and I find like we get a lot more respect out of them maybe than males do. Actually, I find it interesting because we probably give a lot more good feedback than maybe
nicer.
some. Yeah, and I mean, so we push them. We definitely expect a lot from them, but we thank them and we encourage them. And I remember one of the things I was asking in the last project. It was a mess. I showed it to Laura. We actually had to work in a loft. With a catwalk, and we had to take out a huge hot tub and tile out of from up,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
it was a mess. And at first the guys were like, "What?" I'm like, "No, we got this. This is what you're going to do." And I nailed it all down. And then we were asking them to do something pretty hard at the top there.
Yeah.
And I remember afterwards, he was like a kid. He was like, "Did you see I finished that?" And I was like, "I knew you could do it, right?" And so it just kind of was cute. Like he was so proud of himself for accomplishing the hard stuff. And so I know we have a good time with it. Some days a better time than others. But
There's always challenges with renovation work.
Always.
so it's kind of fun. Yeah.
I was thinking, I'm not sure how we were actually ever introduced, but I remember us having lunch at Harvest in Lancaster, and we were talking, I think, about your Harrisburg store at the time for you leasing it. And trying to find you a spot, and you said, "Oh, I'm leaving here and I'm going to Rhode Island." Or no, you said, "I'm going to New England." I'm like,
know,
"Where
I
are you
remember that.
Where are you going to?" We just met. I'm like, "Where are you going to New England?" And you're like, "Oh, you wouldn't know," or something. And we kept drilling down, and literally that night, which it's at least 6 hours away, I said, "My sister works where your son's going to be," and you sent me a picture that night with my sister.
It was so bizarre. We had met, and my son was a lacrosse player, and he was like top 10 in the country, and he was recruited to every school in the country. And he chose to go to the Naval Academy. Yep. So he went to the Naval Academy prep school first, which is in Newport, Rhode Island.
Where my sister
and I thought,
teaches.
she's not going to have any clue what that is, what that means. And then she says, my sister teaches there. And I was headed up there, and there was, I think it was a lacrosse game or something. That day. And her sister came out. But then what was even more amazing is my son was struggling with chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. And her sister met with him and tutored him and got him through. I mean, I'm going to cry. It was so amazing, right?
Really was
and
cool.
And it was so cool because her sister's boys, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, they're SEALs anyway, but my son is special warfare, for the Marines, and he just got stationed in San Diego. I actually just drove across country with him and got him stationed down and got him settled out there, and she was saying,
that was a cool
trip. that her nephew is down there too. So yeah, it was a really interesting connection.
Just that connection. It was crazy.
Was so bizarre. And it was so nice to know Ellen was there too, because one time my son got really sick up there, and I was able to call her, and she went to the hospital and checked on him. I can't even.
Aww.
It's
meant to be.
Beyond kind.
That's the Lord.
Yeah. This is another lesson. I always think in lesson is that, always just being open to sharing your needs or, struggles, because you just don't know who you're sitting in front of.
Right,
and there could be an answer and a resource right in front of you. And by keeping everything, to yourself, you just miss so much of that. So,
I agree.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I think of that story a lot. Ellen still talks about it.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
I forgot
she's
all
always
about
asking about
it. And it was so nice to know that she had gone before, and that I could, and I know to this day, I even thought about as my son gets into these challenging, he just told me the other day, he's probably going to be sent down to the border because there's like high cartel activity, and my son is emergency response. And so, and her son has been in those high, danger kind of positions. So
we should send them surfing together.
There you go.
Connect the two of them.
Yeah. They probably would get along.
Yeah.
Nice
So
and shared life.
and I was dying because I was following your trip across country, which was amazing. You went to parks and
yeah, we had a good time. My son and I had always planned to go cross country, but when he graduated from high school, he was immediately taken to the prep school for like a plebe summer, which is like a basic training or whatever.
Torture.
So we never, basically torture. And we never got to do it. So I was actually in Kenya in February when he found out where he was getting stationed, and he called me and he's like, "Mom, it's time. We're ready for a cross country." So it was cool, and it was awesome because of his special warfare training. He had just learned to stay up for days on end, so it was awesome. I was like, we don't need to stop before we get to South Dakota. So like he basically drove straight on through to South. It was great. I'm like, I'm just going to rest over here because he's like, I'm not even tired. So he had just gone through 9 months where they were up continually in the snow.
It's brutal.
Hiking. It was brutal. Yeah.
They try to kill you.
It really was. I think he doesn't really have complete feeling in his toes yet. But yeah, so it was fun. And we did all the things. I learned that my son is in very good shape. He's hiked with machine guns and 150-pound packs. So when he says in the future, "Mom, it's only a 1.5 mile hike to the Delicate Arch," if anyone's ever been there, make sure that they mention that it's 1.5 miles straight uphill. Yeah, and that they suggest that you take a gallon of water per person, and that multiple people have died on the way. But none of that was part of the fine print that I got on my way up. So it was all good. So him being 24, and it was.
Fun.
I was honored that he would take me on that trip. But when we got to Bryce, he said to me, "Mom, I think I'm going to go hike this canyon alone." And I was like, "That's cool. I'll do all of the drive ups," because as I was leaving the Delicate Arch and how challenging it was, and I was glad I did it, I drove by the sign that said, "Viewing point for the Delicate Arch." And I was thinking, how did I miss that before? I could have just seen it from here. But anyways, the experience was
And then the pictures of his apartment. You have perfect experience from the Airbnbs because it's completely furnished and ready to go. I was so impressed.
I could set up an Airbnb in like 24 hours.
Yeah, she's for hire too.
And I am for hire, but it was so funny. So we got out there, and my son was so anxious to get there. We literally got there in the middle of the night. Now, he has slept on rocks outside with nothing, so this is no big deal for him, but there's nothing in the apartment. And there was no heat or anything. In California, it wasn't that cold, but it was in the 50s, right? So he says to me, "Here, I brought this sisal rug from home. You can sleep on this." I'm thinking,
He wanted you to sleep there on the floor?
that's where I slept.
You did?
What were my options?
Yeah.
He was fine on the
hard
floor, no big deal. So the next day, really, we rented a U-Haul and it was done within 48 hours. It was completely done. Surfboard and all. So surfboard and 2 wetsuits, all of it done.
That's
so
awesome.
it was fun.
Very impressive.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
So you're not just a national traveler, though. You're an international traveler.
I do love international travel.
Lots of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I know that you mentioned you were in Kenya and that you have some projects and things. You go back there regularly. You're pretty involved. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I was amazed. This summer, one of my mentors had started a foundation in Kenya, 14 years ago. And I've always known about it, but I wasn't intimately involved in it. So back in July, he kind of came to me and said, "You're on a short list to take over from me." I was like, interesting, not something I ever saw coming. But as he laid it out to me, everything that I've had the opportunity to do in my life really equated to what he needed. And so, again, I was glad I wasn't one of those people who had 20 years at one place. And I had all these varied experiences. So, yeah, I've joined Empower Hope, which is a program in Nairobi that is a sustainable economic business model. So we're about sustainable mentorship, so giving young people the opportunity to start businesses or trainings for jobs that then actually pay back 2 months' salary after the first year into the leadership center that we've opened in Nairobi. And it's in an informal community. So if anybody doesn't know, you don't call them slums anymore. They are informal communities. Okay. And in February, I had this opportunity to spend the whole month there. We have an amazing team. Our director of business development graduated from Caltech. He has a master's degree from there. He worked for Bank of America here and now back in Nairobi. So he brings a wealth of knowledge for young people and businesses. So we have a venture capital fund that is funding young entrepreneurs and helping businesses scale under what's called Ambatana Business Communities. We also have a leadership center, which is the nonprofit portion that is in Githagoro, which is a relatively large slum in the Kenyan Nairobi area. And then we are also building a boutique hotel that will give $50 of every stay as an impact fee back to the leadership center. So it is meant to be a sustainable model, so we will not be donor dependent. Yep. So building all of that. And so when I thought about my experience with hospitality, my experience with building, the business experience, the nonprofit experience, it was just such a blessing to have this next opportunity.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really was fun. So.
It seems like there's a lot going on in Nairobi. We had I don't know if you know Mark and Karen Ackley, Next Door Photos, but they actually outsource all of the editing of their work to people who are working through a similar program.
Okay.
In Nairobi.
I meet them.
Yeah, they're local.
Nairobi is a great city, right? It is a very technology forward city. And the UN, so our hotel is near the Blue Zone, which is where the United Nations is, the U.S. Embassy, Israeli Embassy, all of the embassies. But the United Nations are moving their headquarters in the next 3 years from New York to Nairobi.
Oh. Wow.
So it really is going to even continue to grow as being a hub of international culture. It's a great city. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I'm anxious to continue there, and the opportunities are vast. And even the kids that I've met, I say kids, they're like young people. Yeah. They're just the amount of grit and resilience in them, and smarts and determination is just unbelievable. Some of the people, so we have about 240 ambassadors that have already graduated from our program, which includes life skills, soft skills, conflict resolution, financial management, all of that. One of them went to a culinary training school, and so he cooks at the Leadership Center for lunch every day, and he cooks for us when we're in Nairobi. He's just brilliant. And if he tells you his story, he'll talk about his challenges, but they don't define him. He ended up telling us this story of how his mother died young. He was sent out to his grandmother's in the country. She died. He was back to Nairobi. And he lived homeless in what they call the Globe Theater, which is where a lot of the street kids live. He was there for about 4 years. Wow. And he's unbelievable, kind and thoughtful. And some days I'd be so busy I wouldn't have time to eat my lunch. And he would come to me at the end of the day and say, I noticed you didn't take food today. Here, I saved this for you. I mean, to have somebody taking care of me that way was unbelievable. He speaks 7 languages. He's just the kindest person, but that's the kind of people that we're working with over there, they are so amazing. And just with a little resource and a little opportunity, they will run with it. So it's a joy to be part of it.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you also do some personal traveling.
I
Not
do.
to transition
I
quickly
said
because that sounds amazing.
she should be
but
a tour guide.
yeah.
I would love to do that, actually.
So
I
Kenya's
love-
just been a recent trip, but you do a good bit. I know she's told me. Bali, right?
Bali was amazing. Yeah. You know,
More than once.
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah, that's my fun. That's my passion.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I work just to travel. I think my daughter is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a really good time together, but I love finding the best spots and the greatest deals. Like we are not expensive travelers. We are really on a shoestring. In fact, I was sharing with Laura that you use what you have. So our last trip to Bali, my daughter had bought us Taylor Swift tickets. And just as a fun thing, she thought it'd be a nice, so it was Mother's Day a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And 2 weeks before Taylor Swift, she said to me, Mom, I could sell these tickets. We could go to the movie. And I could pay for 3 weeks in Bali. And I was like, done. So she did. She planned the whole trip to Bali. And it was unbelievable what we were able to do on a shoestring. So, again, it goes back to people thinking they can't do things because it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of money. But we did 3 weeks in Bali for about $4,500, including our airfare.
For both of you.
For both of us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
People need to follow you on Instagram because you do some
Oh,
those
we do.
amazing
Yeah, we had
things,
the best
experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And didn't have to be terribly expensive. So I think that's what I love to encourage people on my Instagram too, is just like, you can do this. This is doable. We were just talking before we started about Colombia, and finding these stopover deals where you can stay for free and all these things. So just, really encouraging people and inspiring people to live their best life, whatever their resources are, is just really exciting to me.
Yeah.
It's within reach.
Yeah, it is within reach. Absolutely.
I think you could be a motivational speaker. I'm seeing a TED Talk in your future.
I do. Well, I think that is something that as I continue to get older and kind of boil down what I love, it is just exposing people to new opportunities that open up resources and ultimately their best life. Like even working with this young woman's peer group, it's been so fun. And I met with one of them this morning, but literally within the first 2 months, 3 out of the 4 girls left a position that they were not happy with and gained something that they are absolutely over the moon about. And it was all about releasing fear and realizing that they probably need you more than you need them. And it's just a shift in mindset sometimes, thinking, I'm the underdog, to more like, no, I have power and I can make things happen, whether it's in travel or whether it's in real estate. But I think that's something.
So this group, is that in Lancaster?
It
where
is,
you're mentoring?
yeah. So I had started mentoring a young woman that my brother had met probably almost 8 years ago. And I just was always pushing and challenging, and why are you thinking that way, and why does it have to be this way, and what else could it look like? And she ended up starting her own business. She ended up moving out of the area for a while, all the good things, and we've stayed in contact, and it was so funny. Even as of Friday, she wanted to change something really badly, and she was in a position that she wanted to change. And I was like, again, what are you afraid of? What is the worst thing that can happen? Walked her through it. And she made the call, did what she had to do, and called me right back and they said fine. And I was like, exactly. I think so many people limit themselves by the narrative that they put in their mind of what that other person is going to say. I mean, it's part of negotiations too.
Yeah.
The thing I told her is, say what you want to say and then be quiet.
Listen.
Because the person who talks first in any negotiation loses.
How did you learn some of these skills that most people do not have? I don't think.
I mean, I do love Chris Voss, so I have a good, never split the difference. But good question, Laura. I think it's just listening in life, yeah. But just allow silence sometimes, even though I've talked a lot on this time. Learning to be comfortable with silence just leaves so much space for powerful thought and powerful communication.
Yeah.
And I remember I was doing a deal it was one of my biggest deals when I was in the Cabin Project, and it was with Coca-Cola. And it was a multi-million-dollar deal. And that was a big deal, for me at the time. And I remember that I was talking because I was nervous.
Yeah.
And it was a vice president of Coca-Cola said to me, Paget, I'm listening. You can, it's okay. Like basically
Slow pace.
recognize how nervous I was. And I remember that distinctly. Like,
Yeah.
I'm showing my cards by not allowing silence. And so I went into another deal, which was actually in South Dakota, which is why one of the reasons my son and I went to South Dakota, because if you haven't been there, I feel like it's an underrated state, right? And I love the Badlands, and I love Mount Rushmore and spearfish and all that, but I did a deal there. And I took the lessons I learned from the Coca-Cola vice president, and I was doing a deal with a developer from Denver. And again, now I was back in only girl. I worked part-time. I sold 3 times what every guy in the place sold, and which was a point of contention for a lot of them. But I remember saying to this guy who was beating me up on price, and I just said to him, you know what, Daryl, I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, but it sounds like we're probably not the right fit for this project, and I'm going to wish you well on it. So learning to fire someone, basically, which I'm sure you guys know. And literally, it wasn't even 40 minutes later, he called me back and said, okay, we got it. And when I went out to the grand opening of this, he introduced me as like the master negotiator, which was kind of funny. But, learning the lesson that sometimes you have to walk away.
Yeah.
The deal isn't worth it, and that maybe they need you more than you need them.
Yeah.
So.
Did you grow up in a log house?
I did not. I did not. So I grew up in a family, though. This is funny that I think this is where I came from. My father was always a dreamer, and nothing was impossible. And growing up in Ephrata, where, nobody really left Ephrata, my father, we would drive to Times Square because he loved the hot dogs out of a hot dog, vendor. We would literally go to New York for the weekend, or he would drive to 30th Street Station in Philly on a Sunday afternoon just to get a hot dog. Like, that was unheard of, right? And so my father really just was like, you can do what you want. I remember in 1980, we had an old VW van. It didn't even have heat. We had a kerosene heater, which would not be legal, so don't do this. But
in the van.
In the van. And he took us to Lake Placid for the Olympics.
Wow.
We had no tickets.
A lot of this is from your dad.
Yeah, like
I'm
we had
hearing
no
that.
tickets. How do you?
You just showed up.
You can do that? I mean, who knew? You can just go to the Olympics? Yeah, and we saw the Olympic, the Russian USA hockey game. We were there when USA got the gold. It was actually on the lake. The lake was so frozen that all the awards were on the lake. It was the coldest in my whole entire life, but it was something I will never forget.
An experience.
And I think from there, I always thought you can do anything.
Yeah.
Why define it, or why,
Yeah.
say you can't until you
I
try.
love that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. That is amazing.
So how we got to log cabins. So my dad saw this thing where in the Netherlands they were making these interlocking log cabins, and he thought, I can do that. And so he, had a machine developed. It was rudimentary to make it. Well, my brother at the time was the youngest person ever admitted to GMI, which is the General Motors Institute for Technology and Engineering in Flint, Michigan. He had to get special permission. He's very bright. And he was 16 at that time. He went 3 years to engineering school up there, and he didn't even graduate, came back here and started the business with my father. So he developed all the machinery, which was one of a kind that did what we did. So it was called Conestoga.
Is there more siblings than you and your brother?
So that's an interesting.
Columbia. Somebody lived in Columbia.
So I have one biological brother, but my parents adopted 8 Vietnamese brothers and sisters.
8?
Yeah. So I
Wow.
have 8 Vietnamese brothers and sisters that came to live with us.
Wow.
So so it was very different. So my husband's Korean because I grew up in a kind of an Asian household. But yeah, it was very interesting, which is probably one of the reasons I felt like I wanted to adopt as well. And we adopted our daughter. Yeah, so it was always a very open house to people that needed something. And they didn't speak any English when they came at all. They had lived in a Japanese refugee camp for a year before they got here. And they had been very wealthy in Vietnam before the the regime changed, and then they had to hide and escape. And but they are amazing. Each one of them is brilliant. 3 of my brothers are nuclear engineers, and one of my sisters is a pharmacist, and they are all amazing.
What an opportunity.
They're all
for
siblings
parents.
to each other.
They're all siblings to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, and then my brother and I are the only biological. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was interesting household, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
You're very international.
Are you the oldest?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
She's the
I'm
oldest. She
I'm
must see.
7.
She must see a
Yeah.
pattern.
7. Okay.
All biological, none adopted.
Yeah.
but
Ben from Lancaster, right?
no, from Central. Well, my
Lancaster,
mom's from
yeah.
California, and my dad's from Central PA.
Okay.
So a little bit different.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
an interesting mix.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that those things are, they make you a little
Yeah.
stand out a little differently.
And did you go to Liberty at 16? Is that what you
So
said?
I actually went to Word of Life at 16
Yes.
Oh yeah.
in New York.
New York.
And I was
Yep.
kicking and screaming, and I didn't want to do it. I graduated high
That was
school
young.
early. It was young, and I was dating a guy that my parents were like, no, that isn't happening. So they said, you're going to Word of Life, and I did. and it was a great thing that it was, and I'm glad I did. I was at Word of Life for 2 years, and it was definitely really valuable. And the School of Youth Ministries, which really where I put in my heart for the inner city, youth. And from there, I went to Liberty. And then when I graduated from LU, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was a recreation major.
Yep.
I wanted to be a psychology major, but my mom said, no, that's too hard. You don't want to take in all of that stress of everyone else. Just become a recreation major, and then you can do what you want with it. And it was true, actually. So I thought that the epicenter of recreation is the Department of the Interior, National Park Service. So when I was graduating, I wrote and got an internship with the National Park Service. And so kind of that's how I got to DC. And then from there, I took over as the director of recreation for all the inner city day camps, which I didn't know at that time what I was going to be put up against. I've got a young lady who's like 22, white young lady with 65 people under me, all ranging in age from 17 to 65, all black and all hating me. And so that was an experience, it really, and it was a very dangerous city. So I had a 5-foot map of DC, and I would just lay on the floor and I would memorize ins and outs because I couldn't really stop for directions. And they were pulling bodies out of a lot of my camps in the morning when I was coming in. And it was very dangerous. DC, the city, was incredibly dangerous compared to now. And we didn't have cell phones then. This was, 92. I didn't have GPS, so I know DC probably better than most cab drivers because I had to get in and out of a lot of the most dangerous areas. And so it was a good experience, and that's kind of how I ended up in DC. And then I ended up working with a homeless program and starting a teen program for the homeless shelter, and then going to start my own programs. And
Wow. Yeah. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, we were blessed. It was a great time. It's great when ignorance is bliss, when you just don't think you can't do anything. I ended up being invited to, Clinton was the president at that time. I was on his task force for teen pregnancy, and I was part of the mayor's initiatives for some of the urban development. And we were just really blessed. The National Cathedral really supported us in a lot of ways. And we grew to about a $500,000 budget.
That's amazing.
It was amazing, and it was challenging. And I learned a lot about the church at that time as well, which was not necessarily supportive of what I was doing. And that was a surprise to me.
Right.
The church that I was at valued order and cleanliness, beyond the needs of others. I loved it when somebody said, this church stinks. And I'm like, that's great, because that means that there's a lot of people here that are in need of us. And, but I didn't have that experience with the support of the church. So, things you learn. And
life lessons.
Yeah.
But I think I could just keep talking to you.
I know.
I know. I don't know if we're out of time. I feel like I've talked too much already.
No, you haven't talked too much. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks.
I would love to hear from you what advice you would give to people who are younger, kind of getting started in life and in business. What would you say to them, or what do you? I know you do some mentoring. So what sorts of things do you want younger people to hear about life and about business and what they're trying to do with their lives?
I think that I find over and over and over again, the narrative that young people put in their mind is not necessarily the narrative of reality. And I'm seeing that with these girls. And even I met with one this morning who was really kind of challenged with this narrative that she thought, what she thought success looked like, I guess. And it came from her parents and, all of these things. And I think success is shifting and changing and looking different. And success is very personal, too. It doesn't have to be what everyone else values as success. And, we were sitting in a beautiful coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. And I was saying, this is success, that you're, that you're not having to rush off to an 8 to 5 job that would, my husband works for Wells Fargo. He is so happy. Every morning he goes to the bank and every day he comes home. And I tell him if I had to do that, I would poke my eye out with a pencil. Like that would just kill me. So everybody's idea of success is so different. But don't assume you know what someone else is going to say. Yeah. And if you want something, if you're in a position from a boss, or if you're trying to start your own thing, like ask. The worst they can say is no, and it's not hurtful when it happens. Yeah. And I think that's what I would say, because each of the girls that I'm thinking of, like literally in the last month or 2 months, I would tell you one of them loves landscape architect. Like that's her passion. She had started her own business in landscape architecture, and she wanted to do that, but it just didn't work out, grew too quickly, was in a position she really didn't love. She's now working at Longwood Gardens.
Amazing.
That's like a dream position. And I just think we're too afraid to ask for what we want. Yeah. We just think it's too far out of reach. And maybe it isn't within this step reach, but maybe you're 3 steps removed from it, and just be okay with that moving into whatever it is. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think every girl that I challenge them, go ask or go say, it went exactly the way that they wanted it to go, but they were so afraid.
I'm hearing you say, be fearless.
Be fearless. Yeah, be fearless. Yeah. I always ask myself this question, like, what's the worst case scenario and can I live with it?
Yeah.
I feel like in several points in my life, I've actually hit the worst case scenario and I lived and I'm okay, and so therefore we'll figure it out. And that does give you, it's interesting working with my daughter who's 20, she's 27 now, 26, 20, I guess she's 27 now, I lost track of time. But it's interesting because when we run up against a challenge, sometimes I find she goes, whoa, 0 to 60, right? And I'm like, okay, this is figure outable. But, bringing her back down because she hasn't had the same experiences of, okay, it'll work out. Like, this is what we do. This is what we do next. This is what we do then. So I feel like that's something that I've brought to her is that, okay, let's knock it down. Like, what's the first step? And then what do we do? And then what do we do? So I see her less and less going, off the charts when something happens. Because a lot of things happen. Yeah. And it's not always great. And you own, multiple properties and things, don't always work out, but we figure it out. So I think that's what I would say. Be fearless, not stupid. But if it's like, I have a thought that I can figure it out, and if I don't figure it out, this is what was happening, I can still deal with that, then go.
Yeah. Yeah, love it. We have a closing question that we ask everyone that I would love for us to finish on. And it is, if you could go back and start your career over, right? Go back to being 20, you're starting over. But you could keep all these experiences that you've had, this knowledge that you've gained over the years. Would you do anything differently? And what would it be and why?
Oh, yeah, I would dream so much bigger. I had no idea. Yeah. Like I see the opportunities that my son has and the Naval Academy and the travel and the opportunities my daughter has. We didn't have access to the internet. The world was so much smaller. Yeah. If I wanted to find out about a school to go to, I had to go to the library and look up a book and and
encyclopedias.
I know, like I did. These things, right? And I mean, I would have dreamt so much bigger. Like I didn't even dream of international travel. I thought that was so far away. Yeah. How would I even get there? How would I afford? How would I know where to go? Yeah. So if I could do it again, I would be, shooting for the moon. I feel like I've done well with the resources that I had, but if I had it again and knew what I know, the sky would be the limit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I didn't leave a lot of silence, but always leave silence.
That was good stuff.
So great. I could keep.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
That was Paget Rhee sharing her insights on small business and life. For more information on Paget, Be Balanced, or learn more about SB and Lattice, click the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Deal.